In January 2023, a 45-year-old mother of two vanishes into thin air. Nicola Bulley was out walking her dog and taking a work call when all of a sudden, completely unexpectedly, she falls off grid. What followed was a media frenzy, public scrutiny, a raft of potential theories, and fingers being pointed close to home. This is the strange, controversial, and ultimately tragic story of Nicola Bulley. And in today's episode, we are going to try and answer the question, is there more to Nicola Bulley's disappearance than we are led to believe?
It just seemed absolutely impossible, like a dream. I cannot get my head around any of it. But right now, it is as though she has vanished into thin air.
Remember, in this episode, we are just two normal blokes and we'll be using evidence that is publicly available, stuff that you might be able to access yourself. And yes, we might go through some theories about what happened in this case, but remember, all we really care about is trying to find out the truth of what actually happened to Nicola Bulley. Now, if you do like this episode and you want to see more of us, hit the like on the video right now and always remember to hit subscribe. It helps us out massively. Now, let's get into understanding a bit more about who Nicola actually was. Nicola was a 45-year-old British lady who worked as a mortgage advisor, and she was the mother of two school-aged daughters. She actually grew up in Essex, but later moved to Lancashire and settled in a village called Inskip. Nicola actually had a partner called Paul, and they had been together for 12 years at the time of her disappearance. Paul actually described Nicola as an exceptional mum and the most loyal friend that you could ever have. He also said that on the day that she went missing, she was full of beans, excited with work, and had plans for the upcoming year. So this is where we get into the 27th of January 2023. And Joe, why don't you tell me what happened on that day?
That day just started like any other, to be honest. Obviously, Nicola did the school run. Paul was a man that worked from home. So he worked off of his laptop and he would be in the house. He would work remotely. Obviously, this is around the time that a lot of people are working remotely anyway. And at 8:26 a.m., Nicola leaves her home to drop her two daughters to school. Around 15 minutes later, she arrives at the school. And as she normally would, she chats with other parents in the playground upon dropping their children. By all accounts, there is nothing untoward, nothing out of the ordinary, and Nicola seems her usual sort of happy, jolly self. She then heads straight to a nearby popular dog walking area. She actually gets there within about 5 minutes of dropping the kids off at school, so I'm assuming it's very, very close to the school. And throughout this whole time, she's communicating with friends, she's communicating with work colleagues, so much so that she's even on a work phone call at points during this time when she's walking her dog, and we'll get into more of that. She organises a play date with one of the kids' parents for their kid to go over and play with her children by sending a text message, and she eventually sits down on a bench. There are actually multiple sightings. Bearing in mind, it's a very popular dog walking area. There are multiple sightings of Nicola near the bench and even sitting on the bench while her dog Willow was actually off of its lead and harness. Now, the call actually ends at 9:30 with pretty much everyone logging off of the call after that. However, despite the call being over, Nicola's phone stays logged on to the call. Within a few minutes of that last sort of recorded interaction of being logged on to that call, Nicola's phone and dog Willow are both found. Nicola's phone is found placed perfectly on the bench, and her dog Willow is found just kind of wandering near the bench. Nicola is nowhere to be seen.
So basically, Nicola is now missing. Now remember, as Joey says, there's lots of people that recognise Nicola and also a lot of people that will sort of like cursorily know her. Like, you know what dog walking is like. Like basically this area, very popular, people will recognise each other. They might not even know who the person is per se. They might not even know their name, but they would know them by their face and they would know them by the dog potentially as well. So this person finds this phone, sees the dog. It's very, very unusual, isn't it? Like it's one of those things that just feels completely odd. So that person ties up Willow to the bench and leaves Willow there. And what they do is they take the phone, and I think effectively they go home and start calling a few people that they know and sort of start talking about this with other dog walkers in the area.
This member of public took the phone?
I think so.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. Because basically there were records that the phone was moving around from the location. Okay. The phone didn't stay on the park bench, effectively.
Speaking about that park bench, just quickly, when we speak about the scene of where Nicola was last seen, it was obviously massively tampered with in terms of, if we skip forward and you know, say that it is a potential crime scene per se, when we initiate the fact that she's missing, there was a lot of tampering with that. There was a lot of people going over, walking around and stuff like that, which obviously makes it more difficult to investigate what's happened, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. And this is the thing, like, that it was very difficult to contain that scene. And to be fair, at this point, let's be honest, it's not necessarily a crime scene right now, is it? So the dog walker then goes and speaks to various different friends and people that they know, and somehow they find someone that actually knows who Nicola is, recognizes the dog, and effectively identifies who she is. Basically, one of those people that were, as I say, sort of like friends of friends, like it's a few people removed, isn't it? Like there's lots of people talking, and they managed to find out who she is pretty quickly, which is amazing to even say. They actually call the school. The school receptionist picks up, and they basically go, "We found Willow. Willow is by herself. Has Nicola," they call her Nikki, "been back to the school? Have you heard from her? Is there anything awry that why Willow might be left?" Yeah, exactly that. Basically, the receptionist says, "No, we haven't seen her." So the receptionist, again, I think has some clarity of thought. I wouldn't necessarily do this immediately per se, but the receptionist immediately calls Nicola's partner, Paul, and says, "We found Willow. Willow is by herself. Nicola isn't there. Do you know where she is?" And obviously, I don't know, like, would your heart sink at this moment? Like, you're definitely concerned at this point, are you? When you're like, I don't know where my partner is. This is really unusual.
Yeah, I think you'd be massively concerned. I think if you found someone's phone, not that concerning. Really not that concerning. If you find someone's phone and you find their dog off of the harness, and you know that this is a woman of routine, like you say, the reason it was so easy to quickly identify that Nicola had gone missing and to be able to even ring through to the school is because she was a woman of routine. Most of the dog walkers around that area were, and it was a small sort of place that she went missing from, so fairly easy to track down.
Totally. And I think this is important to mention at this point. Paul has tried to contact Nicola during this period of time. He actually calls her, at 10:41 and doesn't get a reply. And then he says a text message at 10:48 and basically says, "Have you got lost?" So effectively, he's working from home. She was meant to be at home in more than enough time by 10:48.
Can I ask a question?
Go on.
Why is he calling and texting her if the school have already called him to say they found Willow on the phone?
I think that was before the school had actually called him. I think that was actually slightly after. That was during this time.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know at this point, maybe.
Until those calls were happening, no. In fact, I can confirm that now. Basically, the school call him at 10:54. So that's the point. He does that. So they call him and they basically say, "Yeah, it's a weird one. We found Willow. We found her phone on a bench and the harness halfway down the embankment on the floor." So this is what I mean. Super weird. Paul then leaves the home at 10:56. That is caught on a Ring doorbell camera. So we see him actually leaving the house in a hurried state, immediately runs out of the home, and that's on camera.
Yep.
The next point that we then get is at 11:01, Paul dials 999. Now, I'm interested to see what you think about this, mate. Do you think this is an early call to 999, or would you, if this was your partner, would you have been in that time period immediately call 999? Would you go down and go and look for her first? Would you call the police straight away? I found this not weird, but I was like, fair play to this guy. He's gone straight away, called the police, got them involved.
Well, there are people that would speculate, right? And they would say, "Oh, it's very, very early to jump into action." We recently covered the Jay Slater case, and we were speaking about the amount of time that had passed, or lack of time, before they set up a GoFundMe. And we were saying we found it, slightly odd and stuff like that. I would go against that chain of thinking in this situation, because if it was me and something completely out of the ordinary like that happened and it was my partner, you just have a gut feeling. you have a feeling, and we watch so many sort of true crime documentaries and things like that, and we hear from parents, partners of missing people, and they all say the same thing, don't they, Josh? They all say, it's just, I just knew
something was wrong.
Even when the phone rang before anything, I had a horrible feeling. And okay, that might come over time, and that might be something that you feel over time, but I don't think there's anything suspicious about how quickly. I actually salute him in how quickly he
I do too.
Alerts the
and we
police.
say the first few hours of a missing person report is the most important, and this guy got on it straight away. So I totally agree with you, by the way. I respect what he did. The police initially thought that this was like a fairly normal thing. They didn't worry too much at the start, but that worry very quickly turned to a more serious investigation actually half an hour later. So the police immediately at this point got the details from Paul. They found that she'd left the dog, the phone was there, and basically there were too many things that didn't add up. So they actually classified this case as a high risk case. So they immediately did that at 11:50, which again, I think you do have to credit the police, as much as we don't always do it at that point, for getting straight involved and getting in a search. So this is when the search starts, right? This, as we say, it's January 27th, right? So this is when the first actually gets underway. This was a huge search, and I think all of us watching this really would say they saw it on the news, they saw it on social media, they saw the police getting involved. It was a national thing. At this point, there were multiple agencies actually looking for Nicola straight away. And can I just say, I'm just going to list the agencies because I think this is really interesting. A dog unit, a drone team, fire and rescue, a swift water team, mountain rescue, National Police Air Service, and an underwater search and marine unit. So this wasn't, we've covered cases where we've talked about police and they do like half-hour search and they sort of just, they can't find anything because they've got a few bobbies on the beat looking around and they don't get it. That isn't the case with this. This is like a massive amount of people looking for him. In fact, I heard 200.
Well, actually, I'll go one further than that, and this may be something that we discuss whether it was helpful or harmful later on in the case, but for every service you just named there was the public as well. The public were looking for her. People were taking to this dog walking area to search for any clues they could. And in a lot of ways, ways that could have been harmful to the investigation as well, it should be noted, there were recorded incidents of people sitting on the bench and taking selfies and stuff like that, which just...
just cording it off. I'm sorry to say, but just cording it off, to be fair. So what is fair to say is that the search started off and focused around the general vicinity around where she went missing. And I think predominantly downstream of where she went missing, right?
Well, that it's key to say right here that the police had a theory of what had happened to her.
Yes.
And they were very strong on that stance.
Yeah.
And that theory was whether it was on purpose, whether it was accidental or somewhere in between, Nicola had ended up in the river. And maybe again, that's one of the reasons why the police were jumping into action so soon, is the fact that although we don't often see the dangers of nature and we don't look at it in that way, there are many dangers of nature, and the fact that this woman has gone missing from right by a river is something that obviously means that you need to spring into action immediately.
Yeah, I think the police initial theory was that she was ill or injured and had fallen in the river as a result, and then potentially, more harm became of her from that point. So that's what they started doing. They actually got like a thermal imaging camera, put that in the river and tried to find her in that point. To be fair, they couldn't find anything. And so I think the next point we get to is they're doing this for like 12 days. So like, we're talking about like the initial hours after this disappearance. We're going to zoom over now to 12 days later. They still haven't found her. All of these people, all of these agencies being around, still not being able to find anything to do with it, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it wasn't just the search of the river that these guys were doing as well. The police actually looked at CCTV from around the area. They also asked for dashcam footage and also Ring doorbell footage as well to try and ascertain any exits of the general area to see if they'd seen either Nicola leaving the area or someone who could potentially do her harm leaving the area. And they pieced all of that information together, and they basically came to the conclusion and actually did a statement about this, the police, that there wasn't anything or any third party that they were particularly concerned of in and around the area, because effectively they looked at the footage and they couldn't find her. So this is where we get to the point, Joe, where we meet a member of the Specialist Group International, this guy called Peter Faulding, who had some of the most in-depth CV experience that I think I've ever seen in trying to find missing people, particularly in bodies of water.
You know, when we use the phrase experts in the field, this guy was an expert in the field and he had the receipts to match up to it, didn't he? He had been involved in terms of like media, he had been involved in 4 searches for bodies and missing people in rivers, in waters, lakes, things like that. But he had been successful, more importantly, in recovering multiple bodies. So to say that they got in the best of the best would not be, you know, an overstatement at all.
No, and this guy worked both for the military, but also for the police, and he'd worked in England and internationally as well. So as we say, his record was absolutely insane. Did you know that he actually worked on the Spy in the Bag case, the MI6 spy? Have you heard Have you heard about this case? This is one, by the way, and there'll be lots of comments right now saying that we have to cover this. So maybe I'll save it for this episode, but this story, effectively someone was locked in the inside of a bag, dumped elsewhere, and they didn't find any sort of record of how they were trapped inside this bag. And it was an MI6 spy. Have you seen that the UK has effectively banned adult videos?
I can confirm or deny.
Have you tried to access a website recently, Joey, and been told that you need to put in your ID, your phone number, where you grew up, where you lived, etc.?
A couple of times a day.
A couple of times a day. And I think it's a problem that a lot of you have been experiencing as well. And the one way around that, because no one wants to put in their personal details into those websites, I can refute that for myself as well, as Joey wouldn't want to admit. But the way to do that is through a VPN, and our partners on the channel, Surfshark.
Surfshark's a virtual private network. So, say for example, these laws that may or may not have come into websites that me or Josh may or may not frequent from time to time aren't actually in every country. They're just in the UK at this moment in time. And what Surfshark allow you to do is change your VPN to another location. Let's say, for example, a location that doesn't have certain websites blocked.
I've heard Spain is a very good location for that, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. So we're going to keep it short. All I'm going to say is there's a link in the description if you want to get access to Surfshark. If you do, using our code Joey and Josh, very, very simple, you will get access to 4 months for free when you buy an annual subscription for Surfshark. And remember, they're a huge partner of the channel. We love them absolutely so much. And also, let's be honest, they're going to do you a favor. We're getting your rocks off. And that's as simple as it is.
Now, with Peter himself, do you think when he, and you know what, it's funny, I was about to say when he was hired onto working for the case, he actually offers to work for the family of Nicola Bulley and obviously Nicola herself in trying to locate her. He offers his services for free, doesn't he?
He does.
Right? Do you think that he realised at the start of this what a figurehead to this case he would become?
In a weird way, I don't know if he necessarily wanted to become a figurehead. I think what this is a story of really is that I think the police briefings were clearly awful in this case. And there were so many of them where they'd either not spoken to the public, not done, you know, the criminal elements they had to, i.e. isolating the scene, protecting the scene, that sort of thing. And also they hadn't been protecting Nicola in the way that they potentially should have done. So this guy, Peter, he effectively has to become a spokesman for the police, even though he wasn't ever formally employed by the police. And we need to make this clear. He was working on behalf of Nicola's family. They had to negotiate with the police to allow him to be able to go into the river and help find her.
The reason I asked the question is it's probably quite a sort of sensitive area in terms of this man has gone to help in the search. He's an expert that's offered his help for free, and he's using sonar device equipment, like some serious equipment that is state of the art for what I know. And he's kind of basically said that if she's in this river, I'd have found her, right? And do you know what time period he gives?
Go on.
He said he'd have found her within an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
That quickly he could do it. I mean, as Joe says, they're using sonar technology, so even more advanced than the thermal imaging that the police were using.
Now, the first thing, in my opinion, that is top of the priority list for Peter in this situation is finding, locating Nicola. Whether that is alive or not, he needs to be able to find out the answer for what happened to her. And therefore, I think that that is at the forefront of his mind way more so than the potential of the speculation that could come from the statements that he gives, in terms of how I said he was sort of, you know, front and center and he was giving briefings and stuff like that, because he actually states that he does not believe that Nicola's in the river, doesn't he?
He does, and that's a precarious one, isn't it? Because effectively that changes the course, and I suppose the perception of the general public in what they think about this case. And this is where we really do have to start talking about the conspiracy theories, and I suppose like the alternative theories of the case. As we've said earlier on in this episode, people were so fascinated by this that they were actually going to the location and effectively trying to be detectives. They were operating as sort of like social media detectives, so much so that there were various theories. And obviously, you know what it's like at the time. You see TikTok, you see YouTube videos, you see stuff in the press. There'll be so many different sort of like, I suppose, approximations of what people thought had happened. What was clear was that people found it unusual that a seemingly happy 45-year-old mother with 2 kids and a seemingly happy relationship would have just, you know, gone into the river or, you know, fallen in, when by all accounts she was a very strong swimmer. By all accounts, she had no reason to be necessarily even like very close to the water either. So there was a leap of faith by a lot of people that something weird had to happen for Nicola to end up in the water.
Yeah, and there was obviously a high likelihood that this was, if she had fallen into the river, completely non-intentional. Because I know everyone's different and each case is different, but, you know, for example, if I'm planning on taking my life tonight, I'm not going to go and do a Sainsbury's weekly shop just before, you know? I'm not going to arrange a play date. I'm probably not going to take my family pet with me to do that. Do you see where I'm going with this? So I think that the chance that this could be self-inflicted and a purposeful act was one that the public just did not buy into at all at the time, did they?
You can understand that, because I feel like the picture that we were being painted at the time was that she was incredibly happy, that she was a doting mother, that she had made plans, that she had spoken to her partner and about the future, and that, you know, really she had the whole life to lead, and there was a sort of a positive, you know, aspect to her life to aim for. But what I would say, Joey, is in reality, that might not necessarily have been the case. And this is where we got to start thinking about other alternatives that could have happened at the time. Now, I couldn't believe this when I found out this piece of information, but in January of the same year, she had actually been reported to the emergency services as having a sort of a mental health episode, a problem with her mental health. So much so that, as I say, the emergency services were called. Now, do you know who called the emergency services on Nicola?
I don't. I could have a guess.
Have a guess.
Paul?
It wasn't Paul.
Nicola.
It wasn't Nicola.
Who?
This is fascinating. It's actually her sister. So her sister calls up. Apparently this all comes about because she had spoken to her sister and effectively said that she was struggling looking after the kids and that she didn't want to be here. She actually used the words, "I didn't want to be here." Now, for people to have not known that information and to come out and say that she didn't have a potential motive for any harm to herself is really interesting.
Yeah, but when she was seen to, spoken with, examined by doctors, they didn't actually ever register her as having anything wrong with her in terms of a mental health aspect, in terms of needing help with anything, did they?
No, they didn't. There was no record of that within the doctors, which I find, based on what we've just heard from Laura, her sister, Louise, her sister, I find that very weird that wasn't mentioned in the file. If you use the words, you know, "not sure I want to be here," that for me is an element of thoughts that should be within a file from a doctor, personally. How do you feel about this? Because do you think this has got legs, this theory?
Do you know what it is? I'm a more emotional person than you, aren't I? Do you know what I mean? Like, what I mean by that is, like, I have ups and downs, and I'm like, when I'm down, I'm down, and when I'm up, I'm up, and it's like sometimes it could be within a 40-minute window of time. So Have I ever said to someone when I'm venting or whatever, I don't want to fucking be here or whatever? Yeah, I have. Do you know what I mean? Have I ever thought about harming myself or taking my own life or anything like that? No, never have, no. So I'm playing devil's advocate and saying that I don't necessarily think that off the back of, by the way, her sister, who would know her better than most, yeah, but is not an expert in that field, I don't think off the back of what her sister has reported, it is something that would necessarily make me think, right, well, that's it then. This woman has intentionally entered the river and done this to herself. I would actually more go off of the advice of the mental health experts that examined her and say, okay, I think that they might have a case.
By the way, by all accounts, Nicola was absolutely furious that her sister had made that call and was really, really annoyed about it. Put it into context, mate. That could have had an impact on how she looks after her kids, potentially her job. Like that has serious implications. And so I can completely understand why she would be so angry with the sister. Now, it wasn't just the sister that was making, I suppose, public assertions, or lack thereof, we should say, because it wasn't public until the point in which we learned about it. But it was also the media that were painting Nicola in a particular way as well, weren't they?
Well, before we say this, right, there was the possibility asked in the immediate aftermath whether Nicola could have, done this to herself, and whether she had problems in her life and, a history of depression, anything like that. And the police actually at the time said that was non-relevant to this case. And basically, to explain what they mean by non-relevant is, we've looked into that. That's not a factor. We're not considering that, right? 2 weeks later, the police then actually completely change what they've said, and they say that she was struggling, and she was struggling with, I don't want to say it like it was a massive thing, but a bit of alcohol abuse at the time. And I mean, I find this really bizarre. I'm maybe not the most clued up on it. They linked it back to the menopausal change, didn't they?
This is one of those things that the police obviously fucked up here. And what people have rightly said afterwards, and looking back on this case, is that the state of her reproductive system should not have been something that anyone talks about publicly. This is one of those things that you speak to your doctor in private about. You talk about, any issues that you're having. So the fact that the police have effectively outed her and said, use this case, they could have used completely different language. They could have said, she was struggling with her mental health. She was struggling with issues in her own personal life. She was struggling, with her own physiology. They could say something, words to the effect, without actually saying this. So again, what this then means is that the public have painted a picture which is so unfair with the way that she actually was. Like, we all go through ups and downs in life. As you say, we all have our moments. It seems like Nicola, by all accounts, has had a tough Christmas and a tough period around Christmas, which a lot of people do, by the way. A lot of families go through this.
Blues, mate.
It's a thing. It's a total thing. So again, for the police to out this, she's painted as a very vulnerable woman, which I think at the start of this case, when we were first learning about this, we didn't see her as a vulnerable woman. We saw her as a strong mother who was out on a dog walk and something had happened to her. So immediately things are changing.
I don't see her as a vulnerable woman.
Yeah.
I never, ever subscribed to the theory that Nicola Bulley entered that water on purpose, off her own accord. There was no pattern of giving up. And this is what you will often see before this, right? Before these events happen, there are certain patterns. And the obvious thing would be a note being left behind. I don't think we can actually say the word because of YouTube sort of reasons. But there would be a note left behind. There will be differences in the interactions that they've had with their family, because this person might know that, or will know, in effect, this is the last time I'm going to see my family. Also being person that owned a dog, I don't think you would take your dog there either. And not only that, with all of that being said, there are 1,000,001 easier ways to do it. And Nicola Bulley loved her children unconditionally. As far as we know, loved her husband unconditionally, right?
Partner,
Her
yeah.
partner,
Wasn't married.
It wasn't
Yeah,
her
yeah,
husband.
yeah.
Yeah. Her partner, Paul Ansell, loved him unconditionally, right? And I just don't think in any way, shape, or form that this woman would want her disappearance to become a cult-like fascination, a mystery, anything like that. So from the second it was suggested, in my head, no, not a conscious decision to enter that water.
And also, was there any evidence where she walked down to the river? Like, were there any footprints that showed like she'd slipped or like any? Because like, you know, when you're on like a muddy bank of a river, if you fall in, I've done this myself. You usually cause a big channel into the river.
Yes. So let me give you my understanding on that. Experts went to the scene. Now, we've already said that the scene was obviously tampered with. General members of the public.
Contaminated.
They think that they are helping, and ultimately they're not helping all that much. However, when they went there, they said there is no clear indication in terms of footprints and stuff like that Nicola walked over to the water. There's actually no clear indication of that. What they did say is that because of the terrain and the mud and the ground, if she had have walked over there, they could not be certain that they could say, yes, she did take that path. So although they felt there was no evidence of it, they couldn't be certain even if she had have that they would have been able to find that route.
Yeah. And then the dog, what do you know about the dog? Like for me, if something has happened, I've had a dog. If something happened to I've fallen over where I've had a dog with me.
Yeah.
Like the dog starts barking straight away, like shit's going down because effectively they care about you, really.
Yeah.
What was going on with the dog?
Here's my theory on the dog. You've had a dog.
Yes.
Yeah. I've had about 12. I'm not joking. I can list names now, right? I've had about 12 dogs in my life. Whether they were, mine or my sisters, brothers, whatever, right? Mate, I know canine behavior very, very well, yeah? I feel like at least one of these two things would happen, right? The first thing is that the dog would try and jump in the river. Now, half the dogs I've had would have jumped in that river after me. Half the dogs I've had wouldn't have. Now, the ones that wouldn't have would have stood as close to that river as possible, lifted their head towards as high as they can go, and barked and consistently barked. Whereas the dog was said, Willow, the dog was said to be found sort of pacing in circles by the bench.
Completely dry, by the way. Very important to say.
Completely dry, so hadn't been in the water themselves. And the fact that they're by the bench would kind of suggest to me that was where Nicola last was. I don't know. You just sort of feel the dog being off its harness as well means that, let's say, and we'll explore other avenues, but if Nicola was led off somewhere or something like that, you would imagine the dog would follow. You would imagine the dog would follow. So it was really, really frustrating that we as the public and definitely the police service weren't really able to get any indication or any clues off of the dog itself.
No. And then also, the key thing to say as well is that the work call wasn't hung up. So the last point in which we know anything about her was, I think the volume was adjusted on her phone, wasn't it? And that was at 9:18. Now, that could have been done by someone else, but I feel like it's more likely than not to have been her. That's at 9:18. Now, the meeting itself finishes at 9:30, doesn't it? And at that point, she effectively stays on the call. So the phone could have very well been on the bench, still on the call, and Nicola could have been gone at this point.
Yeah. Now, it's very important to know, you said the volume was adjusted. Well, how was it adjusted? Was the volume lowered, or was the volume...
We don't know, yeah.
heightened?
I don't know publicly.
I do know.
Oh, go on.
Yeah. The volume was turned up
on
her phone. Suggests to me that she may have already had it on a speaker if you turn the volume up. Because if you were, let's go along with the lines of a theory that I don't personally subscribe to, that she voluntarily walked into the water, then, maybe you'd put your phone on the side, you'd turn the volume up, because as you come further away, you'd need the volume to be louder to be able to hear your call. If that was your plan, to go into the water, you wouldn't give a fuck about the work phone call.
You probably wouldn't have even been on it in the first place, let's be honest.
No, you wouldn't have.
So everything that you're trying to say here is you don't believe the theory that she intentionally went into the water.
I would put every penny to my name on it that she did not intentionally go into that water.
Now, what about the theory that she entered the water in some way? Do you believe that theory? That at that point that we're talking about right now, she was in the water?
Okay. I think that before we discuss that theory, we need to discuss the other possible outcomes and the speculation around it, because there were one or two witnesses that came forward very, very swiftly after the appeals. And these witnesses weren't said to be known to each other. And they both basically gave accounts of what they perceived to be suspicious activity in that area. And the accounts are very, very similar. And the information was that there were two men around that dog walking area who, as I say, because it was popular and commonplace, a lot of the people knew each other, so who obviously hadn't really been seen there before. They were stood near, I believe, a red van, and when people walked past them, it was said that these two people that came forward with the witness statements said that both of them felt like the men did not want to be seen, and therefore had their faces either covered, hoods, things like that. I think around the time people might have still been wearing the masks because of the and whatnot. But either way, these two men didn't want to be seen. These men weren't actually ever identified. One of the witnesses said that they saw one of those two men close to the bench around the time of Nicola's disappearance. So straight away, there is one lead there that people will that people would want to discuss.
I don't know how much weight we can put towards this theory of these two random blokes, because to be completely honest with you, I haven't heard that much about it, to be honest with you.
No, and they did scale through CCTV and stuff like that, and not much.
There
really
could be blind spots, but also I felt that they went through enough CCTV for the police to say that there wasn't anything suspicious about people in and out of the area, and they did comb through it. So I think you almost have to take them for their words at that point.
The other thing as well, and we have to jump forward to then come back a little bit, is Nicola was wearing a Fitbit, right?
Yep.
And her Fitbit, obviously it monitors multiple different things, but one of the things it monitors is heart rate, right? And her Fitbit shows that there was a sudden spike in her heart rate, doesn't it? And it was around 9:30 a.m.
Yeah, I think it was 9:22 is when the spike actually starts. So very soon after that volume adjustment at 9:18. So what, again, I don't want to jump too far forward, but what a lot of people have said is that is, consummate to her falling in water.
Yeah.
Like they say that, cold water exposure is very common with high blood pressure, but then also a high spike in heart rate. It's one of those things that immediately happens as soon as you hit the cold water.
And without being able to see the exact Fitbit data, which I think is only privy to the pathologist and whatnot, without seeing it, you would go, okay, that makes sense. By a river, heart rate spike, whatever. Your heart rate can spike considerably from all different types of shock, and not just the feeling of freezing water. From different types of shock, you could read a text that sends your heart rate spiking, right? Someone could jump out on you that could send your heart rate spiking. So there's multiple things that could happen. You could fall over. You could slip, fall over onto the floor, send your heart rate spiking. So although it's a very clear indication of, okay, this now we're starting to piece things together, this could happen, it doesn't rule out the possibility that it wasn't freezing cold water that makes her heart rate spike, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
No.
But let's talk about another theory about this, because your heart rate could have spiked from meeting someone, something weird happening, and then potentially you're going off and you're led away somewhere. So there's another suspect, isn't there?
Well, hold on. If you're led away somewhere, right, and the dog's off the harness, why would the dog not follow to protect?
You never know. The dog could have been told to sit by someone the dog knew, potentially.
This is where we get on to Nicola Bulley's partner, Paul Ansell.
So what do we know about Paul? He, as Joey said earlier in this episode, was working from home. He was actually an engineer. And like we said, he's the father of their two kids together. He'd been with Nicola for 12 years. And he had openly said that she was going through a bit of a tough time around Christmas, around the time that she went missing. And let's be honest, Joey, in cases like this, it is understandable to say that the partner is the immediate suspect. We've seen it in pretty much all of the cases that we covered. The first person you always look at is the partner.
Yep, first person you always look at is the partner. And I don't know whether it is just a true crime lover's go-to, but we do tend to pay particular attention and way more attention to any case when a suspect goes on camera. And I think that what we've got to do now is we've got to have a quick, brief look at Paul's interview that he gave in the sort of immediate aftermath of Nicola's disappearance.
Just tell us your thoughts and emotions at the moment.
I don't really have anything to say other than what the family said yesterday. My whole focus is on two girls, just staying as strong as I can for them. It seems like we're no further on. It just seemed absolutely impossible, like a dream. I cannot get my head around any of it. It is as though she has vanished into thin air.
So Joey is now going to become a bit of a body language expert in this. Didn't know you were qualified in that, by the way.
Qualified in lots of things you don't know about, my friend.
So what was the thing that you saw in this interview that immediately raised suspicions?
So just to make it clear, I'm not actually revealing yet or not whether I was suspicious of Paul. But what is certain is that a host of people were. In fact, I would say the vast majority of the public and social media apps and the internet were going into frenzy over this interview. Now, I do understand why people had their concerns, okay? It's 20 odd years on, but we're not far removed from seeing Ian Huntley go on camera and give interviews to the same news station and analysing that. Stuart Hazel, a man who had committed a horrific crime, go on camera again to the same news broadcaster. So when Paul Ansell, the closest person to Nicola, goes on camera, a lot of people are playing armchair detective and are looking at it and trying to read the body language. And on the general sort of watch of it, that to me, on a general watch of it, having no sort of background on it, that to me does seem like a bit of an uncomfortable interview to watch, right? One thing that Paul does consistently throughout that interview is there's shaking your head and there's nodding your head. Shaking your head, we interpret as a defensive action, a deflective action, almost an action sometimes that I'm not actually believing the words I'm saying. Yeah. So nodding your head is often perceived as being, that you're telling the truth and whatever. And Paul was doing a lot of shaking his head. He was doing a lot of looking at the floor. And because the interview was done, look, you're going to be massively concerned if your partner is away from you for an hour, let alone days or whatnot. But because the interview was done quite soon after, I think that a lot of people, or I know that a lot of people, felt like he had a very defeated mentality in this interview. So much so that the interview has to remind him, there's still hope to be held out. And he actually says, yeah, of course, yeah, I suppose we do still have hope and whatnot. But yeah, there was a lot of people that watched that interview and were suspicious of Paul. Were you one of them?
Do you know when this interview, because I know the date that it was released. Do you know the date that it was actually released?
I don't know when it was released, but I believe it was filmed around 10 days after.
Yeah, I think it was released, filmed the day before and then released on February the 3rd. Bearing in mind she went missing on the 27th of January.
Okay.
So it's 6 days after. So to answer your question, I always think in these cases, it's very difficult to analyze individual people because individual people behave in different ways. And I think in this one, he's so potentially shocked and so potentially uncomfortable on camera, and also probably told by the police not to talk to the media potentially. Because does he say a word of like, I don't want to go into that, or which a lot of people jumped on straight away, and it was like, why would you fucking talk about it? Like, it's easy to talk about these things. But again, if he's being advised not to talk about these things, then you usually do listen to the advice.
I'll throw another recipe into the mix, and that's sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
Do you know what that does to people? And I'm not being funny. He wouldn't have been sleeping much in that time.
No.
And obviously we want to protect the identity of Paul and Nicola's children. But what I can say is they are of an understanding age. They very much understand that their mother has gone missing. They're of an age where they might have access to smartphones, things like that. They definitely have access to the TV. So they understand what's going on around them. And I just can't even begin to contemplate what an awful situation that must have to be, to not only have to speak to your children about this circumstance and what's happening, but to not have answers for them. It must be absolutely awful. And this is where I think that it's really interesting, because before we cover a lot of these cases, me and you often speak about them, and we'll have our theories on them and whatnot. And it makes videos easier to plan for, but we were quite adamant that we didn't want to give too much away on each bit of this as we dissect it and whatnot. And I knew that you were gonna think that I was suspicious of Paul. I wasn't suspicious of him. That whole thing of like looking at the ground, right? Some people can perceive that as a admission of guilt or something like that. I can't look you in the eye as I say this and stuff like that. I look at the ground all the time, right? And there was one day very recently, which I probably spent most of the day looking at the ground, right? The day that I didn't do the live stream for the Chelsea game. And what was I at that day?
Tell me.
I was at a funeral that day.
Yeah.
Right? I think sometimes it's a show of respect.
Yep.
I don't know if I do it knowingly, but if I'm talking about a sensitive situation, I've had passings around me recently and stuff like that. A lot of the time when you talk about these things, like I'm doing now, you do kind of look at the floor and you do go into a daze. And it's almost the whole no eye contact thing. Like, Josh, there could be a situation. I could be talking about something and I could be explaining something very, very sensitive. And do you know why I'm looking at the floor? Because if I look you in the eye, I'm going to start crying.
Is it that serious?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you think he's so emotional in that moment. And again, he's having to talk about it on national TV in a situation that he would never have been in. It's uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
And it wasn't a conclusion that I drew to straight away. I'm not going to lie and say, oh, straight away, no, I didn't suspect him at all. Obviously, I was open to, anything at that point in time. But yeah, it wasn't. I remember watching that Stuart Hazel interview after the Tia Sharp situation. And I remember immediately thinking, this man's done it. This man's guilty. Not my immediate thoughts after watching that.
And also, I feel like he had an alibi. I feel like he had a watertight reason and an explanation of where he was. I mean, the Ring camera caught him leaving the property. I don't know if it caught him entering the property, because wasn't he at home the entire time?
He was at home the entire time, so it would have caught him going into the property the night before, I would imagine. It also caught him leaving the property. Now, with the amount of time that passed before he left it, it's not inconceivable, right? And again, when I say it's not inconceivable, that means that I'm saying that you can't rule out a 0.5% chance. Yeah. So very, very unlikely, not inconceivable that he could have somehow got out of that house without, going out the front door, being catched on CCTV, stuff like that. What is, in my opinion, inconceivable is that not one bit of CCTV would have caught him, nothing, anything like that. And not only that, he took a phone call from the school, and that phone call would have been traced and would have placed him in the house at the time.
I think even if he was working from his computer, you could even identify that he was working at that period of time as well. Like he was actually on his laptop.
I've done my research into that. I don't know if you can tell me different. I found it very, very hard, apart from the phone call and the CCTV footage, to determine whether or not it was ever made public that yes, we can confirm that he was visiting sites and browsing the internet or doing whatever on a laptop at that time.
If his laptop was seized, which it certainly 100% was, by the way, they would be able to identify that he was using it at the time. Now, obviously, can you identify that it was particularly him? Not necessarily, but you could also, that's all part of circumstantial evidence. We always talk about the circumstantial evidence, don't we?
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is when a laptop's seized, right, and they look at search histories, the internet will always get you in trouble. Believe me. The internet is, you're going to get caught a lot of the time. Most of people that commit these crimes will
give themselves away.
They'll give themselves away by their search history.
They'll search for different things. Yeah. It's quite clear.
They'll have bought certain items, potentially. They'll have searched what is the best way to X, Y, and Z. There was none of that on Paul's laptop at all. So, yeah, I think that, again, like, you know, we've used it recently in the Luke Mitchell episode. Trial by media is something that Paul was the subject of, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I feel like we can just rule him out, to be honest, at this point. I feel like the alibi is strong enough. And I think the police did do that as well, to be fair. Especially bearing in mind, like, if he was a prime suspect, it would have been quite easy to close the case and find out that it was him. Do you know, like, it would have been I don't want to say the easiest route for the police, but it would have been, you know, a way to end the case quicker if they had ascertained that he was involved.
Okay. So for this moment in time, and this is just our judgment, our opinion on it, we don't think there's many legs to the rumours of the two men by a van and whatnot. The police literally never really even mentioned it themselves. So we don't think there's any legs to that. Paul has a very solid alibi. And, you know, we've looked through the footage of his interview now, and we have given both sides of the coins. So to make it clear, can completely emphasize why some people found it suspicious, but I can also pretty much give counter arguments to each and every point why people found him suspicious. So now I want to move on to a theory of, could she have been taken? Could she have been taken? Now here's the thing, right? Constantly spoke about of the fact that this was a very familiar place to the people, and dog walkers mostly, that frequented the area. Nicola is a kind-souled woman. She's a talkative woman, by all accounts, one that would have stopped and spoke to people as she did on that day. Yeah. And she's, you know, she's a well-presented, attractive woman as well, right? So could there have been any third-party involvement of someone who, in effect, and I get that we're going out on a bit of a stretch here, but we need to in a case like this, when the details and the clues are so sparse that we have to sort of start to speculate a little bit. Could there have been a stalking scenario? Could someone have worked? Because it would have been very easy to work out Nicola's routine. It's clear that Nicola had a routine in terms of drop the kids to school, walk the dog. The people that were interviewed, the dog walkers that often frequented that park, said that they would see her all the time. Nicola had a routine. And that for me means that in all walks of life, you get weird people. There could have been a stalker scenario. There could have been someone who took a liking to Nicola, seeing her on these footpaths with her dog, and could have been involved.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of people would say on the other side of that is that there couldn't have been, because dog walkers were around that area. There were lots of sightings of Nicola, and there was no one strange or unusual around her. But that's foregoing the fact that someone could have been hidden. Someone could have known the route and been waiting for this moment to find Nicola.
Yeah, and obviously CCTV experts did emphasise that although they didn't find anything on the CCTV, there were blind spots. So there were scenarios in which Nicola could have exited that location. There were blind spots. Unlikely, but there were. But as much as I say all of this, there's a 12-minute window between Nicola's last action in terms of turning the volume up on her phone, which we assume to be her, right? And her phone being found and her not being there and the dog being on its own, right? But even if we're highly pessimistic and say, no, that wasn't Nicola that touched her phone. Okay, well, there's a 20-minute window between Nicola's last sighting, where she, you know, interacted with people, and between her dog being found. It's a large area, but it is an area that is populated around that time with dog walkers. If Nicola had have been abducted by anyone in that time, the area is spread out enough that noise travels and you would have heard something. I really do believe you would have heard something. There would have been some sort of commotion. There would have been something to alert people. It might not have been a visual thing, but you would have heard something, in my belief, especially if that was someone that had taken her and pushed her in to a river. You know, Nicola's a 45-year-old woman. You'd have heard a splash. You'd have heard something.
So after all of this searching and days of people trying to find her, this multi-agency effort, Peter coming in with his entire search team, the expert team, the police and Peter still had absolutely nothing to go on. But after 3 weeks and on the 19th of February, 2023, Nicola's body was actually found by 2 dog walkers. Not the police, not Peter, not anyone involved in the search and rescue. It was 2 dog walkers that were just walking their dog. Now, where was Nicola found? She was found 1 mile downstream from where she went missing. So after all of these searches where they've gone effectively down all the way to the mouth of the river, to the sea, they'd searched all of this area, and yet Nicola was actually found incredibly close to the bench and where she went missing. She was identified via dental records, and I suppose like a police, I don't think they ever officially said this, but the police assertion was that she'd got caught up in tree roots and amongst reeds, and that's why she wasn't directly visible from the shoreline for the entire 3-week period in which she went missing.
It is worth noting at the same time as this that you say, okay, she wasn't directly visible. She was found by two dog walkers. Now, a body or any object in a river with a that's streaming in one motion is obviously going to be subject to movement, and I understand that, and therefore that means that just because she was found there, it doesn't mean she was always there. This is one of the things that makes this case fascinating for me. This is one of the things that drives debate and stuff like this, right? The chances of her being there and the search team having missed her are so minimal.
So minimal.
In my opinion. And obviously we'll get on to how that affects our judgment and just our gut instinct on what we believe happened in this case. But it is worth noting that the police and the search forces and the experts in that field had searched that. And to say, to say that she could have been caught up in that sort of terrain, well, there were bits of technology used throughout all of that to see if there was anything in there, and there wasn't. So what we're looking at here, in my opinion, is either a very, very small chance that her body was missed when the police were looking for it, a very, very small chance, right? Or we're looking at the possibility that she's been placed there afterwards, aren't we?
Yep, it's literally that simple. And to be fair, then what the police do is they do an autopsy and they try and find if there was any other cause of death, any other reason in which she could have been placed there, any third party that caused any marks on her and that sort of thing. So the pathologist was a Dr. Alison Armour, and she clarified that the cause of death was indeed drowning. Basically what they said is they found within the lungs that there was liquid and actually residue within the stomach as well that proved that the cause of death was that she passed away via drowning.
Yeah. Not only that, a lot of people were saying, like, they're looking at pictures and, you can see a picture of Nicola by the river itself. A lot of people were looking at stuff like this and they were saying, no, she was a strong swimmer. There's absolutely no way. Again, I use the word experts. Experts in that field said that in the time it would take Nicola to take 2 inhales of breath, she probably would have been incapacitated after an accidental fall. So if she had have fallen, it wouldn't have been long until she was unconscious, probably not long enough, despite efforts, to be able to get out of the water.
Exactly that. And then also they looked at, as they always do in cases like this, like marks on the body to say that there were restraining injuries or potentially self-defense injuries and that sort of thing, like people being able to protect themselves. And again, the coroner couldn't find any evidence of that, and therefore they reported that in their findings as well. Now, What's also important to say, based on our theories thus far in the case, is that there was also toxicology done on the body as well. And there was no alcohol in her blood, and that there was a very small amount of paracetamol and some beta blockers as well. But again, this was not in significant quantities by any means, or any reason in which she might have been incapacitated or pass away.
Do you know what % upwards of women that do take their own life have alcohol in their system?
No, tell me.
Upwards of 95%.
Really, alcohol is usually a key factor
It's
in that act. The key factor.
Of women who have unfortunately taken their life when autopsies have been done and whatnot. Upwards of 95% of the time, alcohol's found in the system.
Makes sense. Well, and again, I suppose based on the narrative that we had heard after this, the police, we got to remember the police leaked this publicly. They said in a statement that she had suffered with alcoholism. Again, it's not necessarily vindication on Nicola, but I suppose it's a very important part of this case to say that she wasn't intoxicated at this point or has anything in her system at all.
Can I ask you a few questions?
Go.
Let's start with the Fitbit, because the Fitbit was still recording data. And when I say data, a heartbeat, the Fitbit was recording a heartbeat for a considerable amount of time after Nicola Bulley's disappearance. So there was the record of the heart rate spike. Yeah, which was when, people believed that she went in the water. But the reason there were so many theories that she didn't go into the water were obviously, one, because a diving expert in recovering bodies and things from water had said that he did not believe she was in that water. Two, Paul Ansell, although he obviously, would have changed over time, he initially said, I do not believe she's in the water during the search. And three, the Fitbit, although it shows that spike in the heart rate, it's still recording a pulse for days after the disappearance. Do you know about this?
I don't know about this, but I can give you a little brief explanation if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I'd like you to, yeah.
Related to. So I have had Fitbits before, and Fitbits, their heart tracking data is always said to be suggestive as opposed to the 100% correct information. It's never used in a medical sense. It's always sort of representative. In fact, I believe Apple Watches were they weren't sued, but there was someone that used Apple Watch data in a court case, and they actually ruled that out because it's not 100% accurate. Right. And often what happens in heart rate data is there's two things. One is it's based on an algorithm, not necessarily your exact heart rate. So the algorithm can throw up artifacts, but also when you're in, the water environment, different fluctuations in the water can also impact, the results of the Fitbit.
Basically, what they did was they actually used a test dummy, put a Fitbit on its wrist, and what happened was consistent with what Nicola's Fitbit was recording. Basically, as water motion is passing through the Fitbit is misinterpreting that as a heartbeat. Now, here's the thing with it, right? Let's say, for example, the people that go, right, no, there was a heartbeat. There was no steps. There was no steps taken, right? So there was not a single step taken after the heart rate spike, okay? So there was no steps taken. So, okay, yeah, if you want to believe there was a heartbeat still going and Nicola was still alive, that's fine. But what we do need to then acknowledge is if she was, for those days that there was still a heartbeat, she was lying down. She took no steps, because we know that the Fitbit would have had to have been on her, wouldn't it? So
yeah, it would have.
It kind of...
It's very tenuous.
It's quite easy to debunk the Fitbit theory, I feel.
Yeah. So come on then. What do you think happens? If you got to throw out a theory, what do you think actually happens?
I would rather give you a percentage.
Go on then.
I'm 90% sure that Nicola Bulley fell into the water by accident.
Okay.
And you didn't think.
I didn't think you would think
you
that.
didn't
by
think
any
that
means.
I was going to think that.
That's the complete opposite of what I thought.
You were almost certain that I wouldn't think that.
I didn't necessarily think that you thought that Paul, her partner, was involved, but I thought you would have ascertained that there was a third party involved and potentially wanted to cause her harm.
And this is why I say 90%.
So what's the 10%?
The 10% is that she could have been being stalked. And I very much believe that that is a possibility, right? I'm not going to give away your exact postcode. Probably just give away door number and address. Now, Jakin, you don't live too far from Clapham Common, do you?
No.
No.
Not at all.
Women have gone missing in Clapham Common, for example. I'm just giving you a location close to home. Very famous cases, actually, aren't there? There's plenty of places that people have gone missing from. And obviously, in doing this podcast, what one thing that we've done is looked into so many true crime cases and seen some bizarre circumstances of people that developed obsessions with people that they don't know. And that's why I'm saying I'm 90% sure that Nicola accidentally fell into the water, was incapacitated by the freezing water, was, unconscious before she had even had a chance to have rescued herself, right? I think there's a 10% chance that there is third party involvement in this. And for me, that's a very low, that's a low percentage for me, but I do think there's a 10% chance. I've been a victim of being stalked myself. There are stalkers out there. People do, observe you, behavior, things like that. And sometimes kindness can be not mistaken for weakness, taken for weakness. And when you have a person who, if you look at the descriptions of Nicola Bulley, a lot of people would describe her as being like a life and soul of the party type, someone that would speak and get along with everyone, someone that even if you didn't know, but she'd just walk past you on a couple of times on a dog walk, would give you a smile and things like that. And all I'm saying is there's a lot of weirdos out there, mate. There are. We've covered cases where people have gone missing from way more densely populated CCTV areas, such as the Cleveland kidnappings. People have been taken from way more than that and then have gone missing for 10, 15 years and things like that. So would I completely rule it out? No, I can't completely rule out that there was third party involvement. But what makes it such a low percentage on my theory of it is what would be the motive? Because what we do know is 99.9% of the time, the motive is sexual.
Yep.
And there wasn't any of that. There wasn't any
evidence.
There was no evidence to suggest any of that. So the only thing could be a full-blown psychopath that wanted to push a woman into water.
Yeah.
Right? Unfortunately for me and you, Josh, as rare as they are, they're out there. There's cases that I won't even cover on this channel. People pretty know what case I'm on about, of full-blown psychopaths who want to go out and cause harm to people, children even sometimes, for no reason, really, apart from their warped minds, right? So do I rule out the possibility that someone harmed her? I don't rule it out. But I heavily lean in favour of the fact that something in front of her visually has got her attention. The dog's off the harness already. The fact that the harness is halfway between the bench and the water is insignificant for me. And the reason being is I used to walk my dog's socks off his harness all the time. And do you know what he used to do as soon as I took him off the harness?
Drag it.
Grab the harness in his mouth and go running about a bit. So that dog could have moved that harness. Doesn't really mean anything to me. What I take into account is I'm thinking phones on speaker, work call, don't want to miss what's being said on this work call, just in case anyone interacts with me. Let me turn the volume up a little bit. What's that over there? She's walked over. She's thought she's seen something and she's fallen into the water. What about you?
I think that's the most logical explanation. I think I agree with you on that. And I think what I can absolutely feel like we should rule out is the fact that she wanted to do herself any harm. And I feel like that those rumours and theories are incredibly negative and destructive for the memory of Nicola. So I want to just make that clear that I don't subscribe to that theory.
Yeah, can I also tell you what else that does?
Go on.
It often makes a case easier to be solved. So
yeah, and also
maybe have a look at
who's suggesting that.
Who suggested that.
Yeah,
I'm not pointing any fingers. Maybe have a look at who suggested that. Who did you first hear it from?
To be fair, it was probably from a TikTok video, to be honest with you.
Okay. Well, I first heard it from a police briefing.
Did you?
Yes.
At what point in the case was that?
2 weeks after the disappearance, when the police changed their story, that's when I first heard it.
When they said the alcoholism thing. Yeah.
When they said alcohol and when they spoke about stuff like that. Now, what I'm saying is, I'm just saying, no one don't want their life to be easier. And your work, your job, whatever that is, being easier makes your life easier. And I'm saying sometimes people can be quick to jump to one theory because it's closure.
Yeah.
And I've said this to you before in an episode together. How convinced was I when I was searching for someone over something that we're not going to speak about here? How convinced was I that I had the right man?
You were 100%. You knew, you were searching.
Did I have the right man?
No.
No, I didn't.
Completely the wrong
No, I
person.
didn't.
Yeah.
But why did I convince myself I did?
I suppose because it would have been someone that you knew and therefore the easiest solution.
And I wanted closure.
Yeah.
I wanted closure
And
to
understandably
the situation.
so.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But can we just say the police assertion and the police briefings on this were horrendous.
Yeah.
And the way that they dealt with this case as a result will be remembered so poorly. And I find that a big shame. And before we wrap this up, what I'll also say is because we've talked about lots of different elements of, Nicola potentially wanting to do harm to herself, and I'm sure there'll be people potentially going through similar things. We'll link Samaritans in the description as well. We've done that with several of our other cases that cover those sort of topics. So if you are struggling with anything, there's a link to Samaritans below. But yeah, I don't feel that that's what happened here in the case of Nicola Bulley.
So do you more or less agree completely with me?
I completely agree in that. I don't necessarily know or have evidence to suggest that she saw something, but I know that it was a muddy area around the bank and that people can very easily fall in. And like you said, the time in which she could have been unconscious and incapacitated could be almost instantly. And in fact, they actually said that in the autopsy, it could happen in 3 to 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a very quick turnaround. And also, weirdly, I don't know how much sort of thought to put to this, but there are also some witness testimonies to say they heard a gasping. They had a woman scream gasp in and around that area. Now, the timings of that were disputed. And a lot of people said that was after the phone call had ended, which didn't necessarily make sense in the timeline. But obviously people can get their timings 12, 13 minutes incorrect either way. They can make those mistakes. So
not that this is like factual, with the temperature that they were saying the water was in terms of freezing, basically, I don't think you'd be able to scream that loud.
No, I think...
gasp, yes.
Gasp, yeah. Which is what, to be fair, they heard... They described the gasping, choking noise. Okay,
so let me ask you this. I said that I give it a 10% chance that it couldn't have been an accident. That there's a 10% possibility that it wasn't an accident. What percentage do you give it, if any?
Honestly, like 1%. Like it could happen, but I personally don't subscribe to the belief.
So why are there so many people out there that do believe that there was foul play? Because I just want to get this in now. This wasn't a case that we ever had really on our radar to cover, was it?
No, but people...
Why did we?
People have been asking about it. We've had... the previous case that we just covered in Scotland, what was his name? Luke Mitchell. We've had so many comments about Luke Mitchell, but Nicola Bulley, I would say, is very close second.
There's not a video that we have uploaded where people haven't asked us to cover the Nicola Bulley case. And the conflicting thing with it was we're sort of covering true crime, mystery, anything like that. And I get the mystery part of it is completely relevant, but there will be a lot of people that will argue this isn't a true crime case. And obviously the outcome that we've kind of come to is that it's not.
It's not. But then also what those people don't include is all of the social, all of the YouTube, all of the press that said that this could have been, that something could have happened here. And also, I think what we always do with these cases is we are always suspecting different things going on. And we do that from a perspective of ultimately trying to find the truth. And sometimes the truth is more difficult to believe than a falsehood. Sometimes it's more difficult to actually ascertain what actually happened as opposed to a theory in which didn't. So the reason why we've covered this case, Joey, and the reason why it is a true crime case is because people have decent arguments, not to say that they're correct, but to say something else might have happened here. And so we had to cover it.
Those decent arguments are what I would love to see in the comments section. And by the way, that isn't me, trying to fuel speculation and stuff like that. As I say, on this channel, we always go into everything with an open mind, very clearly so, because we didn't discuss our thoughts and where we had drawn an outcome in our mind on this video. And I knew that it was going to surprise you that I didn't believe that, something more nefarious had gone on here, let's say. So I think it is a really interesting one. But most importantly, I think that this is the time when we want to send our condolences and, our respect to the family of Nicola Bulley, Paul Ansell, her partner, and obviously children. It's kind of a difficult case to cover, these sort of ones. But again, we built up an audience that we love dearly. and we want to keep them happy.
Yeah, I'm really glad we did cover it because of the amount of people that asked for it. So yeah, all of you that have been asking for it, I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Yep. One
fair.
people that will have enjoyed the episode is the members, because the members streams that we do once a week, by the way, exclusively for our members only, they have been constantly asking in the members stream for our thoughts on the Nicola Bulley case and for us to do a video on it. So everyone that's asked for it is for all of you, but a big shout out to the members that have asked for that. You can become a member, by the way, for, what is it, £4?
£5 a month, £4.99 effectively. There's a link in the description below. It's really, really easy to join. And as Joey says, videos up to 48 hours early, and also those bespoke live streams for our members. And also we try and do once a month a video for just the members. So if you want to join,
just quickly,
then you can.
More importantly than all of that, the last 4 cases have all been heavily influenced by our members. So really, by becoming a member, you have a say in what goes on in this channel,
100%.
on this channel, I'd say. So yeah, thank you very, very much, everyone, sticking around to the end of another video. Let us know what you want to see us talk about next, what case you want covered next. We will see you all in the next one.